The chains weren't metal. That was the first thing Sergeant Marcus Cole noticed when they brought her into the ceremony hall. They were crystalline, translucent threads that seemed to pulse with a faint blue light wrapped around her wrists, her ankles, and most disturbingly, her throat. The Velkhari delegation presented her like she was some kind of trophy, and the worst part was, technically, she was. "For your valor at the siege of Meridian Station," the Velkhari ambassador announced, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "The Velkhari Concordat presents this bond gift. May she serve you well." Marcus stood frozen in his dress uniform, surrounded by brass, who were all smiling like this was normal. Like receiving a person as a reward for killing enough of the right enemies was just another Tuesday. The alien woman? Girl? It was hard to tell with Velkhari. Kept her head bowed, silver hair cascading over features that were almost human but not quite. Her skin held a subtle luminescence, pale blue like moonlight on snow, and when she finally looked up, her eyes were solid violet, no whites, no pupils. "I don't want her," Marcus said flatly. The silence that followed was deafening. Admiral Chen's smile became fixed. The Velkhari ambassador's secondary arms twitched, a sign of confusion or offense. Marcus couldn't remember which. "Sergeant Cole," Chen said through gritted teeth, "perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Nothing to discuss, sir. I'm not taking a slave." "She is not a slave," the ambassador interjected, sounding genuinely puzzled. "She is a bond gift, a companion of the highest order. The chains are ceremonial, a symbol of her dedication to. She's in chains." "That's not ceremonial where I come from." Marcus stepped forward, reaching for the crystalline threads around her wrists. The moment his fingers touched them, he felt a jolt, not painful, but strange, like static electricity mixed with something almost emotional. A flash of fear that wasn't his own. The Velkhari woman's hand shot out, grabbing his wrist with surprising strength. "Don't," she whispered. Her voice was soft, musical, but there was an edge of panic beneath it. He froze, meeting those alien eyes. Up close, he could see depths in them, swirling patterns like galaxies. "Please," she added, so quietly, only he could hear. "You don't understand what they are." Marcus pulled back slowly. The whole room was watching. Admiral Chen looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. The Velkhari delegation had gone very still in that way. That meant they were either fascinated or about to become violent. "Fine," Marcus said, loud enough for everyone. "I'll accept her. But we're going to have a conversation about these ceremonial chains, privately." 2 hours later, they were in his quarters on the station. A cramped box that barely fit a bunk in a desk. The Velkhari woman stood near the door, still bound, still with that unsettling calm. "Sit down," Marcus said, gesturing to the only chair. "I'm not going to hurt you. I know." "Then why are you standing there like I'm about to attack?" "Because you want to remove the chains." She finally sat, moving with a grace that seemed impossible given her bindings. "And I need you to understand why you cannot. Try me." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "My name is Velsara. These chains are not restraints. They are anchors. My people's word doesn't translate well. They bind me to this physical plane." Marcus felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "What happens if I remove them? I disperse. My essence returns to the void between stars, where my kind originated. I would cease to exist as an individual." A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. "Your instinct to free me was kind, but it would have killed me." Jesus Christ. Marcus sat down heavily on his bunk. "They gave me a woman held together by magic jewelry, and no one thought to explain this first? The Velkhari assume all species understand the nature of the bound ones. We are not common, but we are not secret. Well, humans just met your people 3 years ago. We don't know anything." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion suddenly hitting him. 12 hours ago, he'd been getting a medal. Now he had what? A roommate? A responsibility. A living reminder that the universe was stranger than he'd ever imagined. "What exactly am I supposed to do with you?" Velsara tilted her head. "Whatever you wish. I am your companion now." "That's not an answer. It is the only answer I have. I was raised for this purpose, to be given to a worthy warrior, to serve and support them. My education covered combat assistance, strategic analysis, emotional regulation, physical comfort." "Stop." Marcus held up a hand. "Physical comfort? If desired. It is not required. It's not happening." Something flickered in those violet eyes. Surprise? Relief? Both. "You are unusual, Sergeant Cole." "Marcus. If we're apparently stuck together, you might as well use my name." "Marcus." She said it carefully, like she was testing the weight of it. "You truly do not want a companion, I truly don't want anyone who doesn't want to be here. He met her gaze squarely. Do you want to be here, Velsara? The question seemed to confuse her. No one has ever asked me that. I'm asking now. She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. I don't know. I don't know what wanting feels like. I was never taught. Marcus felt something crack in his chest. That place he'd spent years armoring after Meridian, after watching friends die, after becoming the kind of soldier who could kill without hesitation. He'd thought that part of him was dead. Apparently not. Okay, he said softly. Then here's what we're going to do. You're going to stay here, because apparently you need to stay somewhere, and I'm the idiot who accepted responsibility. But you're not my servant. You're not my comfort. You're a person, and you're going to figure out what you actually want. And I'm going to try not to screw this up too badly. Velsara stared at him like he'd started speaking in tongues. That is not how this works. It is now. He stood up and grabbed a spare blanket from his footlocker. You take the bunk. I'll sleep on the floor tonight until we can figure out better arrangements. That is unacceptable. I'm a guy who slept in worse places than a floor. Take the bunk, Velsara. She didn't move for a long moment. Then, slowly, like she was afraid of breaking some cosmic law, she rose and moved to the bunk. She sat on the edge, running her fingers over the rough military blanket like it was silk. I do not understand you, she said quietly. Join the club. Marcus settled onto the floor with his back against the wall. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's probably going to be complicated. He closed his eyes, but he could feel her watching him for a long time before the soft sound of her breathing finally evened out into something like rest. In the darkness, Marcus wondered what the hell he'd gotten himself into. 3 weeks passed, and Marcus learned several things about living with a bound one. First, Velsara didn't actually need to sleep. She did it because he'd told her the bunk was hers, and she seemed to think refusing any aspect of his gift would be insulting. He'd given up trying to convince her to let him have it back. Second, she was terrifyingly competent. Within a week, she'd reorganized his entire quarters, memorized the station's layout, and started correcting errors in his tactical reports before he even noticed them. Third, the other soldiers didn't know what to make of her. Heard you got yourself a pretty little pet, Cole, Sergeant Briggs said in the mess hall, loud enough for half the room to hear. Gonna share? Or you keeping all that exotic for yourself? Marcus set down his fork very carefully. Velsara, seated across from him, had gone utterly still. Walk away, Briggs. Oh, come on. I'm just curious. What's she like? They say those bound ones will do anything they're masters. Marcus was out of his seat before he consciously decided to move. He didn't hit Briggs. That would mean paperwork. But he got close enough that the larger man took an involuntary step back. She's not a pet. She's not property. And if I hear you talking about her like that again, we're going to have a problem. Understood? Briggs's eyes darted around the suddenly silent mess hall. Whatever he saw in Marcus's face made him pale slightly. Yeah, sure. Whatever, Cole. He slunk away. Marcus turned back to find Velsara staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. What? You defended me. Of course I did. Why? He sat back down, suddenly feeling tired. Because what he said was wrong. Because you're not those things, but I am. Her voice was matter-of-fact. I am property, Marcus. The chains mark me as belonging to... Stop. He leaned forward. Those chains keep you alive. They don't make you a thing. You have thoughts. Opinions. Preferences. Yeah. I've noticed you like the blue ration bars better than the gray ones. You didn't think I haven't seen you organizing my stuff by color because it bothers you when it's messy? You're a person, Velsara. A weird alien person from a culture I don't understand, but a person. She was quiet for a long moment. Among my people, she finally said, the bound ones are considered sacred. But sacred things are not treated as people. They are treated as objects of reverence, to be given, received, displayed. You are the first to treat me as what? As someone who might have an opinion worth hearing. Marcus didn't know what to say to that. He was saved from having to respond by his comm unit buzzing. Cole. Admiral Chen's office. Now. When he arrived, he found Admiral Chen looking grim, which was unusual. Chen was the kind of officer who smiled through everything, including war crimes testimony. Sergeant, we have a situation. The Velkari have requested your assistance on a joint operation. Specifically, they asked for you and your companion. What kind of operation? A diplomatic vessel was shot down over Keth Prime 3 days ago. 27 Valkyrie civilians, including 3 younglings. The planet's controlled by Thresh raiders. We believe they're holding survivors for ransom, or worse. Marcus knew about the Thresh. Everyone did. They were the reason the Valkyrie had sought alliance with humanity in the first place. Brutal, territorial, and with a particular hatred for anything Valkyrie. Why me? Because you're the best we have at extractions. And because? Chen paused, looking uncomfortable. The Valkyrie ambassador specifically requested that Velsera accompany you. He says her abilities could be useful. What abilities? Chen spread his hands. I was hoping you could tell me. That night Marcus found Velsera sitting on the bunk, her chains glowing slightly brighter than usual. You heard? He asked. I heard. What abilities is he talking about? She was quiet for a moment. Then she held out her hand, and the crystalline chain around her wrist seemed to flow, extending, reshaping itself into something that looked almost like a blade. We are creatures of the void, she said softly. The chains bind us to this reality, but they also connect us to it in ways that physical beings cannot be connected. I can sense life, death, fear, hope. I can tell when someone is lying. And in moments of great need, I can affect things, move through shadows, become hard to perceive. She let the chain reform, and Marcus realized his heart was pounding. Why didn't you tell me? You never asked. A hint of something, amusement, defiance, colored her voice. And I was curious how long it would take you to see me as useful. I don't see you as useful. I see you as... He stopped, frustrated. This isn't about what you can do, Velsera. Then what is it about? It's about whether you want to do this. You could get hurt. You could die. You could die. She tilted her head. So could you. And yet you're going. That's different. It's my job. And protecting younglings is not worth risk. He had no answer for that. She stood, moving closer. And for the first time since he'd known her, she reached out and touched him voluntarily, just her fingertips against his arm, light as air. I am going, Marcus. Not because you own me, or because the ambassador requested it, but because there are children who need help, and I can help them. For the first time in my existence, I want to do something. Please do not take that from me. He looked at her. Really looked. In the weeks since she'd arrived, something had changed. She stood straighter, met his eyes more often. There was a spark in those violet depths that hadn't been there before. Okay, he said quietly. We go together. But you stay close to me, and if things go bad, you get out. Understand? I understand that you are going to worry about me regardless of what I promise. She almost smiled. I find that I do not mind. They left at dawn, boarding a stealth shuttle with a team of 6 other soldiers and 2 Valkyrie special operatives. The trip to Keth Prime took 14 hours. 14 hours of checking gear, reviewing intelligence, and trying not to notice how the Valkyrie operatives watched Velsera with something that looked almost like awe. They see me as a holy relic, she murmured to Marcus when he asked. A bound one going into combat is unprecedented. We are meant to be kept safe, protected, cherished, not used as tools of war. Is that what you think I'm doing? Using you? No. She was quiet for a moment. I think you're the first person who ever asked what I wanted to be used for. The insertion went smoothly. The Thresh had set up camp in a ruined city using the collapsed buildings as cover. Marcus and his team moved through the shadows, picking off sentries, making their way toward the central structure where thermal imaging showed the largest concentration of life signs. And then, everything went wrong. The Thresh had been expecting them. Not specifically them, but someone. Traps, ambushes, overwhelming numbers. Within minutes, 2 of Marcus's team were down, and they were pinned behind a crumbling wall with enemies closing from 3 sides. Options? Marcus shouted over the gunfire. We're cut off, Lieutenant Park yelled back. No way to the hostages. No way to extraction. Velsera moved to Marcus's side. Her chains were glowing brightly now, pulsing with that strange blue light. I can get to them, she said. No, Marcus, I said no. He grabbed her arm, felt that same jolt of foreign emotion, determination, fear, something fiercer that he couldn't name. You go out there, you die, perhaps. Her voice was calm. But the children will live. Before he could stop her, she was moving. Not running. Flowing, like she was made of shadow and light. The Thresh fired at her, but their shots passed through empty air. She was everywhere and nowhere, slipping between the gaps in reality, and Marcus watched with his heart in his throat as she disappeared into the enemy-held building. Cole. We've got incoming. He forced himself to focus, to fight, to trust that she knew what she was doing. The next 10 minutes were a blur of gunfire and blood and desperate survival. And then, silence. The fell back. Alarms started blaring inside the building. And through the smoke and chaos, Marcus saw figures emerging. Valkyrie civilians, stumbling and scared, but alive. And behind them, moving slowly now, her chains dimmed to almost nothing, came Velsera. She collapsed into his arms before he could ask if she was okay. "Got them," she whispered. "Got them all. You idiot," he said, but his voice cracked. "You absolute idiot." "I wanted to," she murmured. "For the first time, I wanted to." He carried her to the extraction shuttle himself. Let the others handle the civilians. Held her as the ship lifted off, and her chains slowly regained their glow. "Don't ever do that again," he said quietly. "I make no promises." But her hand found his and held on, and something passed between them through that touch. A connection that had nothing to do with chains or obligations or duty. Something that felt almost like coming home. Velsera spent 3 days in the medical bay while the doctors tried to figure out how to treat someone whose biology they didn't understand. In the end, it was a Valkyrie healer who explained it. She had exhausted her connection to the void. The chains would replenish her, but it would take time. Marcus visited every day. Brought her the blue ration bars she liked. Read to her from his collection of old Earth novels, mostly noir detective stories that she found baffling but entertaining. "Why does the human keep investigating?" she asked during one session. "He has been beaten, threatened, and nearly killed. Any rational being would stop. Because it's the right thing to do. Because someone has to. Even when it costs him everything." Marcus looked at her, lying pale and diminished in the hospital bed. "Yeah." Even then, something shifted in her expression. "You are like him. The detective. You cannot walk away from broken things. I walked away from plenty. No deal. You carry them with you. That's different." She knew, he realized. Somehow, through their brief contacts, through whatever connection the chains created, she'd seen the parts of him he kept hidden. Meridian Taw. The soldiers he'd lost. The guilt that woke him up at night. "How much can you feel?" he asked. "When you touch me." "Echoes, impressions, strong emotions leave marks. Your grief is—" She paused, searching for words. "Like a scar that never stops bleeding. You hide it well, but it shapes everything you do. Does it bother you?" "No. It makes me trust you more." She reached for his hand, and this time he didn't flinch away. Someone who feels that deeply about loss would never treat another being as disposable. The physical contact sent that familiar jolt through him, but this time he caught something new. A warmth that wasn't his. A fierce, fragile hope. "You feel things too," he said softly. "Don't you? I'm learning to." Her grip tightened. "It is uncomfortable and terrifying, and I would not trade it for anything." When she was released from medical, things were different. Not dramatically. Marcus still slept on the floor, still maintained the careful distance he'd established from the start. But there was an ease between them now. A shared language of glances and small touches and comfortable silences. The station noticed. Some approved. Most didn't know what to make of it. The Valkyrie watched with particular interest, whispering among themselves about the bond gift who had gone into battle, who had saved their younglings, who looked at her human keeper, not with the expected devotion but with something that seemed almost like equality. "You have changed her," the ambassador told Marcus one day, his tone impossible to read. "This is not how bound ones behave. Maybe that's a good thing, perhaps." The ambassador's 4 eyes blinked slowly. "Or perhaps you have simply taught her to want things she cannot have." The words stuck with Marcus, burrowing under his skin like shrapnel. What was he doing? What could he offer her? She was tied to him by chains that would kill her if removed, trapped in a relationship she hadn't chosen. And he was falling for her. He could admit that, at least to himself. Somewhere between the ration bars, and the detective novels, and the quiet conversations in the dark, he'd started looking forward to coming home. Started thinking of his cramped quarters as somewhere she was, rather than just somewhere he slept. But what kind of future could they have? She couldn't leave. He couldn't ask her to stay and mean it, not when staying was her only option. He was still wrestling with these thoughts when the alarm started. Thresh attack. Not raiders this time. A full battle group hitting the station with everything they had. Retaliation for the rescue mission. Punishment for human interference in Valkyrie affairs. Marcus grabbed his gear and ran for his duty station. only to find Velsera already there, her chains glowing bright. "No," he said immediately. "Absolutely not. You're still recovering. The station is being boarded. The Thresh are targeting the civilian quarters." Her voice was steady, but he could see the strain around her eyes. "They are looking for me, Marcus. For any bound one they can find. In their culture, consuming one of us grants power." His blood went cold. "Consuming. We are creatures of the void. Our essence is valuable to those who know how to take it. Then you hide. I'll find you somewhere safe. There is nowhere safe. They have trackers that can sense my chains. As long as I am on this station, they will keep coming." She stepped closer, reaching up to touch his face. Through the contact, he felt her fear, but also her resolve. "Let me fight. Let me choose this. I can't lose you." The words came out before he could stop them. She stilled, those violet eyes widening. "Marcus, I know. I know it's complicated, and I don't have any right, and this whole situation is messed up. But I can't." His voice broke. "Don't make me watch you die for me. I would not be dying for you." Her hand was warm against his cheek. "I would be dying for myself, for the right to choose my end, rather than waiting for it to find me." She smiled, small and sad and beautiful. "That is what you taught me. That wanting things matters. That I'm allowed to want." The station shook. Somewhere close, an explosion sent debris raining from the ceiling. "Stay with me," Marcus said finally. "Don't run off alone. We fight together or not at all." "Together," she agreed. "I find I like that word." The next hour was chaos. Thresh raiders poured through breached airlocks, their massive forms almost too large for the station's corridors. Marcus and Velsera moved through the fighting like they'd been doing it together for years. Him laying down suppressive fire, her slipping through shadows to flank, to disable, to protect civilians caught in the crossfire. But the Thresh kept coming, and they were clearly hunting for something specific. For her. They finally cornered them in the station's arboretum, a small greenhouse meant to provide fresh air and a taste of home for soldiers far from Earth. Marcus had taken a hit to the leg. Velsera had used her abilities so many times her chains were barely glowing. A massive Thresh commander blocked the only exit, flanked by a dozen warriors. "Give us the void touched," it growled in accented but comprehensible standard. "And we let the human live." Marcus raised his rifle. "Not happening." "Marcus," Velsera said quietly from behind him. "Perhaps," I said no. He didn't turn around. "I'm not trading you, not negotiating with you, nothing, foolish." The Thresh commander took a step forward. "You cannot fight us all, maybe not. But I can make sure as hell you don't enjoy winning." The Thresh charged. What happened next would become the subject of official reports, witness testimonies, and quiet legends shared among soldiers late at night. Marcus Cole, wounded and outgunned, held the line. He fought like something out of myth, a man possessed by a fury that seemed to transcend physical limitation. 3 Thresh fell before they reached him. 2 more went down in hand-to-hand combat that should have been impossible given the size difference. But it wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. The Thresh commander batted him aside like a toy, sending him crashing into a row of plants. His rifle was gone. His sidearm was empty. Blood filled his mouth, and his vision was starting to gray at the edges. And then Velsera screamed. Not a scream of fear. A scream of rage, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, that made the air itself vibrate. Her chains blazed with light so bright it was blinding, and Marcus watched as she rose into the air. Her body wreathed in something that looked like contained starfire. "You do not touch him." The void answered her call. Shadows became solid, tearing through the Thresh ranks like living blades. Reality bent around her, and for a moment, Marcus saw what she truly was. Not a slave, not a gift, not a fragile thing to be protected, but something ancient and powerful, and utterly terrifying. The Thresh commander tried to flee. It didn't get far. When the light faded, Velsera crumpled. Marcus caught her despite his injuries, pulling her close, feeling her breath shallow against his neck. "What the hell was that?" he whispered. "I don't know." Her voice was barely audible. "I felt you dying. I couldn't let..." "Hey, look at me." He tilted her face up, staring into eyes that were dimmer now but still hers. "I'm okay. I'm here. You saved me. You saved me first." A ghost of a smile. "Many times. In many ways. Velsera, I love you." The words fell out like she couldn't hold them anymore. "I know it is impossible and wrong, and I have no right. But I wanted to say it. Before I forget how. Her eyes started to close. Stay awake. Stay with me. That's an order. You said. I didn't have to follow orders. This one you do. Velsara. Velsara! She went still in his arms. The Velkari healers worked on her for 18 hours. Marcus refused to leave the medical bay, refused to eat, refused to sleep. Admiral Chen came by twice. So did the ambassador. Neither could make him move. When the lead healer finally emerged, her expression was unreadable. She is alive, she said, and Marcus felt his heart start beating again. But she has burned through most of her void connection. Her chains are damaged. What does that mean? It means the anchor that binds her to this reality is weakened. She may recover. She may not. The next hours will tell. Marcus pushed past her into the room where Velsara lay, small and pale against the white sheets. Her chains were there, but they looked wrong, cracked, flickering, unstable. He sat beside her and took her hand. Through the contact, he felt almost nothing. Just a faint whisper of something that might have been warmth. You don't get to leave, he said quietly. You hear me? You just figured out how to want things. You don't get to give that up now. No response. I never told you about Meridian. Not really. There was a girl there, a civilian. She was 17, terrified, trapped in a building that was about to collapse. I went in for her, got her out, and she looked at me like I was some kind of hero, and I let her think that, even though I knew I wasn't. Even though I knew I was just too scared to let someone else die on my watch. He squeezed her hand gently. She survived, made it back to Earth last I heard. Sometimes I think about her, wonder if she ever thinks about me. Probably not. I was just a soldier doing his job. He paused, struggling with words that had never been easy. But you're different. You see through me. You know I'm not a hero. You know I'm just a guy who's bad at letting go of things. And you're still here. You stay anyway. Her fingers twitched against his. The slightest movement, barely perceptible. That's it. Come back. You've got things to want, remember? You've got. He swallowed hard. You've got me. If you want me, I'm not much, but I'm yours. Have been for a while now, I think. Just too stupid to say it. The chains flickered. For a terrible moment, they dimmed almost to nothing. Then they flared. Brighter than he'd ever seen them. Brighter than when she'd destroyed the Thresh. Brighter than sunlight through crystal. And Velsara opened her eyes. Marcus. Her voice was a rasp, but it was there. You're crying. He touched his face, surprised to find it wet. No, I'm not. Terrible liar. She smiled weakly. I think I like that about you too. How do you feel? Strange. She looked down at her chains, which were still glowing but beginning to settle. Different. Something changed. The Velkari healer appeared at the door, her 4 eyes wide. Impossible, she breathed. What? Marcus was on his feet instantly. What's wrong? Nothing is wrong. The chains, they have reforged themselves. But not as they were. She approached, slowly, studying Velsara with something like wonder. In 10,000 years of bound ones, this has never happened. The anchor point has shifted. Shifted to what? The healer looked at Marcus. To you. The next few days were a blur of tests, examinations, and increasingly excited Velkari scientists. What they eventually determined was this. Velsara's chains no longer anchored her to the abstract concept of the void. They anchored her to Marcus, or more precisely, to the bond between them. So what does that mean? Marcus asked for the 100th time. In practical terms, it means, Velsara said, that I am no longer bound by obligation or ceremony. I am bound by choice. By love, I suppose. She said the word carefully, like she was still getting used to it. The chains recognized what we built together as something stronger than their original purpose, and if something happens to me, then something happens to me also. She met his eyes steadily. This frightens you. Of course it does. I'm one person. People die. That's what we do. And yet you stayed with me when I was dying. You gave me something to anchor to when the void tried to claim me back. She reached for him, and when their hands touched he felt it. The full weight of her emotions, no longer echoes but clear and present. Love, fear, hope, joy, die. All of it, flowing both ways. She could feel him too, he realized. His fear of losing her. His guilt over binding her tighter when he'd wanted to set her free. His love, buried under layers of duty and caution, But there. So clearly there. I did not ask for this bond, she said softly. But I would choose it. Do you understand? If given every option in every universe, I would choose you. This is not chains anymore, Marcus. This is choice. He pulled her close, careful of her still healing injuries. Held her like she was the only real thing in a universe full of chaos and uncertainty. I'm probably going to screw this up, he murmured into her hair. I'm bad at relationships, bad at talking about feelings, bad at most things that aren't shooting. I'm still learning what feelings are. I think we can be bad at this together. That's the worst romantic line I've ever heard. You love it anyway. He did. God help him, he did. Later, much later, they stood together on the observation deck, watching the stars. Velsera's chains glowed softly, pulsing in rhythm with something that might have been both their heartbeats. The ambassador wants me to return home, she said quietly. To be studied. To explain what happened. What do you want? To stay with you. She leaned into him. But I also want my people to understand that bound ones can be more than sacred objects. That we can choose. That we can love. A pause. I want them to see what you showed me. So go. I'll be here when you get back. She turned to look at him. You would let me leave? I would let you do anything you wanted. That's kind of the whole point. He smiled crookedly. Besides, I'm pretty sure I'll feel you. Across whatever distance. That's how this bond thing works, right? You are learning. She rose on her toes and kissed him. Brief, soft, a promise. I will not be gone long. And when you return, I want a proper room. With a real bed. And those detective novels you never finished reading to me. Marcus laughed. An actual laugh, something he'd almost forgotten he could do. Deal. Dot. She left 3 days later, aboard a Valkyrie diplomatic vessel. Marcus stood on the docking bay and watched her go. And even as her ship disappeared into the darkness between stars, he could feel her. A warmth in his chest. A presence that had nothing to do with proximity. She'd come to him in chains, a gift he'd never wanted. And somewhere along the way, she'd unchained them both. Admiral Chen found him still standing there an hour later. She'll be back, you know, the Admiral said. The Valkyrie have already filed paperwork, officially designating you as her chosen anchor. First time they've ever done that for a human. Lucky me. Luck has nothing to do with it. Chen clapped him on the shoulder. You did something no one else bothered to try, Cole. You treated her like a person. Turns out that matters. Marcus thought about that as he walked back to his quarters. Their quarters now, he supposed, even though she was light years away. Thought about a girl in chains who'd asked him not to free her. About the long, strange road from that moment to this one. On his desk, a small crystal sat glowing faintly. A piece Velsera had left behind, broken off from her chains during her transformation. So you remember, she'd said, that I am always with you. He picked it up, felt the warmth of it, and smiled. This wasn't the ending he'd expected. It wasn't even really an ending at all. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, Marcus Cole was looking forward to finding out what came next.